Hello and welcome to another Nerd Uprising video. Today we're going to be doing another character talk, but it's going to be on Sir Jaime Lannister from George R.R. Martin's book series A Song of Ice and Fire and HBO's hit television show Game of Thrones. Jaime Lannister is first introduced to us as kind of being a giant arsehole. But then you fast forward to Down to Dragons and to the current seasons of the television show, and is a lot of people, including secretly one of my own favourite characters, actually. Jaime is the firstborn son to Lord Tywin Lannister, head of House Lannister and Lord Castle Rock, and Warden of the West in the book series at the beginning, in the first book. He's twin brother to the Queen, Cersei, and is the loving brother to his younger, deformed dwarf brother, Tyrion Lannister, because we all know just how much Jaime loves his siblings. God. He's about, I'd say, 32 to 35 years old. In the show, he's apparently 40, but I don't buy that. He looks a lot younger. I think he looks about 35, and I always thought of him, in the books at least, as being around his early 30s, definitely. He's tall, dashingly handsome, long golden curls like his twin sister, and he's supposed to just look like the perfect embodiment of a knight. When Bran Stark first sees him when he arrives at Winterfell in the book, in his head he thinks, now that's how a king should look. And yeah. He is a fantastic swordsman, one of the best in the world, in fact. He even admits to us, he says, I think that only maybe 3 people in the entire of Westeros could beat me in hand-to-hand combat. He doesn't sadly say who he thinks those people are, but I could speculate. I think Barristan Selmy, the Mountain. I can't really think of a third, to be honest. Maybe another Kingsguard. No. I'm not sure who the third would be. If you know, leave a comment, let me know. Thank you very much. He's daring and bold, definitely. Jaime is quite the... he's sort of a shoot first, ask questions later kind of guy. At least at the start of the books, anyway. I mean, when he was a kid, he used to take trips down into the cellars in Castle Rock, and where they'd keep lions in cages. God knows why. We still haven't had any sort of explanation from Martin why that is. They'd keep live lions down there, and Jaime was the only kid brave enough to put his hand in the cage. But that's just an example of how daring he was, even just as a child. Jaime was fostered by Lord Craighall, one of his father's bannermen, in a similar way where Ned Stark was fostered by Jon Arryn, just to learn generic things about ruling, whilst their fathers were, otherwise occupied. He entered a melee, which is sort of like a free-for-all fight in a tourney, when he was just 13 years old. And somehow, at the age of 13, where there would have been these knights and free riders, sellswords competing in this tourney, in this melee in the tourney, Jaime at age 13 won that tourney. And that was telling, that just shows how good a swordsman he was, even at a young age. Whilst he was being fostered by Lord Craighall, later, when maybe a couple years down the line, I think he was so probably about 3 years after the melee, or however you want to pronounce it. One of the other lordling's sons who are being fostered by Lord Craighall had been captured by a sort of like the first Brotherhood without banners, I guess you could call them. Yeah. They were the Kingswood Brotherhood. And they would, ride around and doing various... We don't have much information on them. All we know is there was this one guy, and he was sort of like the olden days Gregor Clegane. He wasn't as tall, he wasn't as brutish, but he was twice as crazy, and sort of he was the madman of the Seven Kingdoms at the time. And Jaime accompanied Lord Craighall along with some Kingsguard members. I'm not sure why they were there, but they were, to try and retrieve this. I'm going to guess it was a squire or an heir to some house in the west, to try and retrieve him from, his captives. And Jaime crosses swords with the Smiling Knight, and he survives, and he also saves Lord Craighall's life, and he fights valiantly. He has his first kill, and Sir Arthur Dane is there, the Sword of the Morning. He is one of the Kingsguard members, maybe the only one that is there, and he witnesses Jaime's bravery. How ferocious a fighter he is. He crosses swords with the Smiling Knight. That is something for a 16-year-old, 16-year-old kid to be doing. Amazing. Arthur Dane eventually kills the Smiling Knight, with help from Jaime. He's so stunned by Jaime's bravery and how good a swordsman he is. On the spot, there and then, Jaime is knighted by Sir Arthur Dane. And that's a big honour, because Arthur Dane is still today in that world, he is a legend. He is an absolute legend. He is up there with the best knights of all time. And to be knighted on the battlefield for your bravery, instead of it being an honour because you belong to a great house, like Jaime does, it means something to earn your own title, instead of having it given to you because they feel like they need to give you it because you're Lord Tywin's son. And Jaime earned his knighthood. Another example of people, earning their knighthoods, even though they come from powerful houses, is one's Sir Jorah Mormont. He was at the Battle of Pike, and Robert Baratheon, I believe it was Robert Baratheon, it might have been Ned Stark, but anyway, he was knighted there and then. Yes, it was Robert. Knighted him there and then on the battlefield for his bravery. So he went from being, Jorah Mormont, heir to Bear Island, to Sir Jorah Mormont. And that means something. Anyway, back to Jaime. So from then on, Jaime is knighted, and he's gone back now to Castle Rock. No longer, lives with Lord Craighall. But his father is Hand to the King. So his father and his sister, Cersei, his twin sister, are down in King's Landing. Now, as children, Jaime and Cersei experimented sexually. Yes, incest, basically. I know it's fucked up. It's very weird. But their mother found out and they were instantly split up. But they would sneak and find ways of seeing each other and, carrying this on. So his sister persuades him when he's on a visit to King's Landing to try and join the Kingsguard. Because if Jaime joins the Kingsguard, that means he's going to be in King's Landing all the time with her. And then they can be together. Jaime's 17 at this time, so he's, in their eyes, he's a man grown. So he puts this idea forward. Doesn't say to who, probably asks Barristan Selmy or maybe even the king himself. And then the good news comes that Jaime's going to be granted a position on the Kingsguard, which means he doesn't have to marry anyone, and he'll be with his sister at all times, because he was actually betrothed to Lysa Arryn, that crazy biatch. Can you imagine that? Jesus, poor Jaime. God, man. So it's all great, it's all fine. Not to Jaime's knowledge or Cersei's knowledge, there have been a few whispers that Tywin is the one actually ruling, and Aerys isn't doing a very good job, and Aerys hears about this, and he's the Mad King. He's spiteful. He rips out the tongue of the man who he believes these whispers sprouted from. That was Sir Ilan Payne, now the King's Justice. And so to spite Tywin, even though Tywin didn't really do anything, he was just a good king's hand. Well, and an arsehole, but still. He grants Jaime the position of a Kingsguard. Not because Jaime asked for it, not because Jaime's a skilled warrior. No, he did that to spite Tywin, because then Tywin is left with a deformed dwarf son as his heir, and his shining knight, Sir Jaime Lannister, heir to Castle Rock, is now Sir Jaime Lannister, Kingsguard. Tywin's in a fury, leaves King's Landing, Cersei's plan backfires. She's in Castle Rock with her father. Jaime is left alone in King's Landing to protect this man who is frankly, he knows he's insane. And he's just left to protect him. And he's got no family about him. He's got no friends, Even his sworn brothers are just, they're more, those kind of guys at work. When you're at work, you're at the office or wherever you work. You won't go out with a beer with them, but you kind of, he hasn't got anybody he can connect with. It's just kind of them guys. So he's left to his own devices. So, an example of Jaime just trying to learn how to deal with the way things work in King's Landing without his father being there or anything. There's this one incident where he's been newly granted the position of a Kingsguard, and he is outside the king's bedroom door, and he's with one of his brothers. I'm not sure who it was, it doesn't say. And he can hear quite vividly the king raping his sister wife, the queen. And he turns to his other Kingsguard member, and he says, "Look, okay, I know he's the king, but we're supposed to protect her as well." And the guy just looks at him and just says, "Yes, but not from him." And Jaime's conflicted, and he's just like, "Oh, Jesus, I don't know how to think about this." And it really does get to him and eats at him. And I believe these are some of the reasons why Jaime becomes the man that he does. But that's just one example. And then there's the time he was also present. He was there in the line of the seven in front of the throne whilst the king sat there. And he watched Lord Rickard Stark be burnt alive, and Brandon, Ned's brother, try and reach for a sword to free him, whilst he was attached to a strangulation device and killed. He strangles himself to death, and there's a burning corpse in front of him. He knows this guy is crazy, but he has to protect him, and his family's way away. And all this because he thought that he could be closer to his sister. Crazy. So Jaime is just immersed in this now, and he's got no way out of it. And Robert's rebellion starts, and of course Jaime's in King's Landing protecting the king, going about his daily duties and whatnot, until the day comes where Lord Tywin, his father, returns to King's Landing. He's outside and he says, "Hey, let me in. I'll protect you from the rebels. They're on their way. Ned Stark's, he's only a few leagues off our army now. He'll be here soon." So, Jaime, this is the untold part of Jaime's story, which we get to hear in, I believe, A Storm of Swords, where we do a 180 and sort of start to feel for Jaime. Jaime says, "Don't let him in. You can't trust him. You know what he's going to do." But the king does, and his father sacks the city. He's murdering everyone, killing, the Targaryen, the last of the Targaryen army. And the king says to Jaime, "Look, okay, you go bring me your father's head. Alright? And then I'm going to burn this place to the ground." Because he's planted wildfire all over the city, right? And Jaime's all like, "What the fuck? What am I going to do?" He makes a split decision, pulls out his sword, kills the pyromancer who is going to light the city on fire, and then he thrusts his sword up through the Aerys' back, the king's back, and out through his chest, and then slits his throat, and sits on the Iron Throne. But he didn't have a choice, you see. But that's not how we see it until books later. So then, Ned Stark comes in and he rides in on his horse and he sees Jaime sat on the throne. And Jaime sort of smirks and gets off. And says something funny. Walks away. And, it's this complicated thing because you can see from Ned Stark's point of view, he was a Kingsguard, man. He was sworn to protect the man he just murdered. That's to Ned, that's a huge deal. And from then on, he just distrusts the Lannisters and he judges Jaime the second he lays his eyes on him. Now, I'm not saying that, Ned shouldn't have judged Jaime, and I'm not saying, no, but Jaime should have killed the king. No, I'm not picking sides. That might be for a different video. In fact, I'm not even decided on it because I like Jaime as a character, yet I'm loyal to the Starks. So it's a conflicted thing for me, alright? Anyway, let's get into the whole Cersei thing. So, Cersei marries Robert, the new king, and obviously, so she's back in King's Landing now, but this is years later. This is, after the whole thing before. And they start having sex again, obviously, because they're in love, and they're twins, and they believe that, they are one, and they see each other in themselves, and it's all really messed up. But, the heirs to the throne don't look anything like Robert. They've all got the curly golden hair. They've all got the green eyes. They're Jaime's children. Joffrey, Myrcella, and Tommen are Jaime's children completely. So that's just messed up. So he's actually a father to 3. An uncle. Weird. He doesn't really care for his children. I mean, especially not Joffrey. We don't really get any sort of thoughts. We don't get told any thoughts Jaime thinks about Myrcella. He feels somewhat responsible for Tommen because he's got nobody around him. His mother's going crazy, and so that's where he starts to maybe take on a father role, but not really. He doesn't really do much. But he has these 3 children, which he rarely even thinks about, and they're considered, for all intents and purposes, by law. The last name's Baratheon, Robert's kids. So, whatever, man. It's fucked up, but he just wants to have sex with his sister, right? Weird. So strange. That's one of the things why he's first introduced to us as this sort of asshole, this creepy guy. He's got messed up stuff going on. I mean, and then, of course, in Winterfell, when he's caught having sex with his sister by a, I think, 9-year-old boy, Bran, he pushes him out the window and tries to kill him. Jaime's not an evil man. He just makes very, very rash decisions. Like I said earlier, he's bold and daring. But, like I've just explained, his past, maybe he's just misunderstood also. But he's got these things that he does do, which are quite evil things. Once he finds out that his little brother has been captured, he straight up murders Ned Stark's guardsmen. All his guardsmen are killed, and Jory, one of Ned Stark's closest friends, and tries to kill Ned Stark, but fails. Ned's horse collapses underneath him, and Jaime rides off and goes to war because war's broken out in the 7 Kingdoms. So now we're at sort of the beginning of the series. We've caught up to Jaime now. He goes through this whole thing of, like I just explained, being the arsehole, but then he gets to a point where he's captured in the war by the Starks. Catelyn Stark lets him go, saying, go to King's Landing, I'll send my guardswoman Brienne with you, but you need to send my daughters back in return. So Jaime, he's like, oh, fine, whatever. There's this whole exchange that happens. Jaime and Brienne are on the road. And, you start to see a lighter side to Jaime, a more vulnerable side to Jaime, once he's captured again by Vargo Hoat. And they take away everything Jaime is. They cut off, I believe it's a Dothraki man, cuts off Jaime's right hand. So he has lost everything he's known for, all his skills. He doesn't have any political skills. He doesn't have any, any huge intellect. Everything he is he's a sword, and what is he if he can't even fight? So Jaime starts to become this more sort of sympathetic character, and this is when he starts shedding light on the events of what actually happened back in King's Landing in the throne room when his father was sacking the city, and just before Ned Stark found him on the throne and killed the king, earning the name Kingslayer, as everybody called him. Kingslayer, the man without honour. This is where he gives Brienne some insight into what actually happened. In the book, I think they're just walking down some road, and he tells her because he's feeling down about it, and he's got his hand wrapped around his neck like some kind of weird necklace that Vargo Hoat's making him wear. I think that's where he tells her, but they portray it in the in HBO's TV show Game of Thrones in season 3 very well. It's a bath scene in Harrenhal, and they sat there, and he if you watch the show and you know what I'm talking about, that scene's really good. I think it's one of definitely my top moments in this TV series. It's brilliant, and that's where you start to feel for Jaime. Then he gets back. Brienne gets him back to King's Landing safely. He finds out his brother's on trial for murder, and he's sentenced to death, and Jaime helps him escape. So you start feeling for him because he's doing things that contradict the character that we were first introduced to. So it just does this weird thing where it turns it round, and you start to think, okay, maybe I shouldn't be judging characters so quickly. And the reader kind of feels like an asshole for jumping the gun with Jaime, and just thinking, man, this guy, he's such a dick. He can push his kids out of windows. He fucks his sister, He attacked Ned Stark, blah, blah, blah. But, no, okay, granted, Jaime has done some bad things, but I do not think this makes him a bad person either. And you also feel weird too as a reader because you start to empathise with Cersei and Jaime's relationship. At some points, you sort of catch yourself. You'll be reading it and you go, "Oh, whoa, wait, that's weird. No," and you just sort of laugh it off. And it's like, Jesus. I just think George R. R. Martin does a fantastic job at writing Jaime. I do think he's the best developed character in the series. I can't recommend reading the series enough. It's fantastic. It's amazing. I have reread the series once. I've read it twice, so once and then a reread. And I focused on Jaime as a character on my first reread. So I don't know. I really do feel for him. Especially there's one scene in a Feast for Crows, I believe. He's having a dream, and it's about his. It doesn't explicitly say it's his mother, but I think we can assume it is Joanna, his mother, Joanna Lannister. And it's the first sort of, he's almost like a scared child in the dream, and you do feel for him a lot. It's just, he goes from being this arrogant, long-haired, beautiful arsehole Prince Charming, doing terrible things, trying to murder children, fucking his sister, trying to kill a character we like a lot. And then he gets captured and he loses all his hair and he grows a beard and it's all greasy. And he chops his hand off. He starts telling his side of the stories that we all, know so well. And then when people say Kingslayer to his face, then you start to feel like, hey man, hey. No, that's not cool. Anyway, I like Jaime. I think he is one of the best developed characters in the series. Portrayed on the television show by Danish actor Nikolai Coster-Waldau. I think he's a good fit for Jaime, especially in these later seasons. Does a really good job. sort of not physically how I pictured Jaime in the books, but definitely a good actor. Especially surprised me with that scene which I mentioned earlier about the bathtub in Harrenhal. I think he did a outstanding job. But yeah, that's just been my sort of rant about Jaime Lannister, to be honest. I hope it's been insightful. I hope you understand the character a bit more now, maybe learn some things you didn't know. You know his history a bit more now, and my thoughts and feelings towards him. Anyway, this has been a Nerd Uprising video. I hope you've enjoyed it. I'm probably going to do some more of these character talk stuff, because I enjoy just sitting here talking about it. It might be boring for you, I'm sorry if it is, but I hope it's informative. That's the point of it. To give you some extra insight, so when you maybe turn on Game of Thrones or read something about Jaime, go, oh yeah, I know about the Smiling Knight and about how he joined the King's Guard and what actually happened in the throne room and the lions in Castle Rock and all this. So I will catch you next time at Nerd Uprising. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you again.